Everyone who's attending tonight for joining us in this Women in Medicine ongoing discussion. We've had several panel discussions touching on resilience in indirect ways, but I really want to go kind of head on in our conversation on how to thrive in the midst of adversity. When we talk about resilience, it can be a difficult conversation. One person's version of strength and success can represent an insurmountable burden on the shoulders of someone else. And we're going to talk a little bit about who gets to define what strength looks like, and how do you define that for yourself? How do you measure what it means to overcome? And in this unprecedented time that we're living in right now, we're consistently seeking new and innovative ways to cope, to thrive, to survive. And one of the definitions of resilience kind of looks at it as a destination. I'm resilient. I am successful. I have arrived. And another definition of resilience looks at it as a coping mechanism. This is an ongoing process of resilience, maybe a process that you never quite fulfill. And so we're really going to talk about ways to get through difficult times, ways to celebrate in the midst of crisis, ways to thrive, and really kind of dig deeper with the distinguished women on the line tonight. I am looking forward to this conversation, some laughter, hopefully not too many tears, Dr. Easterly, but we're going to talk and hopefully grow from this conversation. I'm going to introduce Dr. Easterly first. She has been working within our institution, specifically in the health science campus, since 1998. She holds the position as education manager in the Department of Physiology and Pharmacology, and is also program coordinator in the MSBS in Medical Sciences program. In both capacities, Anita works directly with faculty in clinical and basic science departments to coordinate teaching schedules, manage program website, and student evaluations. Anita obtained her PhD in educational technology from UT in 2019. Her thesis work on the impact of the MSBS-MS program curriculum on academic preparedness of students entering their first year of medical school at the University of Toledo was instrumental in identifying program strengths and helping delineate strategic measures for future improvement. In 2019, Dr. Easterly was nominated by a member of the UT President's Advisory Council as an individual who exemplifies two or more of UT's core institutional values of excellence, student-centeredness, research, and scholarship. This year, she was also the winner of the Dean's Award for Outstanding Staff Career Achievement, and it was my pleasure to witness her receiving that award just a few weeks ago. So welcome, Dr. Easterly.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins.
And if you don't mind, I'll be calling everybody by their first name tonight. It's been a long day. Dr. Sullivan. Dr. Latasha Sullivan is actively serving as the director of the University of Toledo Counseling Center, promoting student wellness. Dr. Sullivan is a graduate of UToledo, earning her doctorate in counselor education and supervision. She is a rocket through and through, also completing her bachelor's degree at UT, majoring in psychology. She is a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervision designation in the state of Ohio. And finally, Dr. Brandy Watson-Wright is board certified in anesthesiology and hospice and palliative of Texas Medical Branch. She chairs the department's Council on Diversity and Equity, and is also getting her PhD in bioethics with a research focus on grief in decision making. She is a native of Detroit, Michigan, and she is also a Michigan State University alum. So welcome to our panelists tonight. We're going to talk a little bit and try to move through it. I'm not sure. Oh, I see you now, Dr. Wright. Hi. Hi. And kind of just talk in broad terms and then hopefully kind of dig a little deeper so that we can share some tools for coping with the members of the College of Medicine. But when we talk about resilience, I kind of gave you both sides of the definition. In one sense, resilience is theorized as this ongoing process that includes our struggles and challenges. In another, it's looked as outcome based. I am resilient. I am successful. I have arrived. I want to know from you first, Anita, what does resilience mean to you? Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. When I think of resilience, I think of adapting in the face of adversity. And if you can adapt in the face of adversity, I think that's what resilience means to me. Is facing all the obstacles and still advancing in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. And Latasha, what's your take on that too, with your work also in counseling the members of the college?
I agree with Anita, and I think it's also being able to acknowledge the challenges and strengths and the skills that you learned along the way so that you can apply them moving forward. So sometimes when we think about people being resilient, people are thinking about like this particular moment in time and not thinking of all the things they've acquired along the way to get to the point they are now, and using that as a tool to say, I can continue to withstand things that are ahead of me. And so I think of resilience as this ongoing process of, as Anita said, adapting but applying skills that we learned along the way. And it also is a process of us continually exercising an opportunity of having hope. Because when we're continuing to go through, we're expecting something else to happen moving forward. And so I think it's a process of acknowledging where we've come from, taking the skills we've learned and applying them on an active basis on a day-to-day, process.
And what about you, Brandy?
I consider resilience to be growth in spite of, and then fill in the blanks. We can continue to grow despite adversity, despite challenges, despite poverty, despite health. If you're growing and continuously becoming that person that you're intended to be, that's resilience to me.
Yeah, I can agree with you all. I mean, sometimes, I can almost resent that term resilient because it seems like an excuse to overburden and raise the expectations to some, supernatural height. Is there an experience in your life, and I'm looking directly at you, Brandy, where you've felt that you've had to face some recent adversity, even professionally, and had to push through?
Yeah, all of 2020 was definitely took some, I had to borrow some resilience for that part. And my challenges kind of started not even with COVID. So on one of our last meetings, where we were a panel, I shared like my health challenges. So right before COVID was a thing, I was in the hospital with the collapsed right lung and ended up having lung surgery, and that happened twice and everything. And so not only of just trying to recover from that, I faced my own challenges of feeling like I have to get back to work because I don't want to be disposable. So despite everything that I've accomplished, despite, the resilience, I still felt like if I don't be present and do stuff, then I'm disposable. And so like at my detriment, just trying to not resting and trying to get back to work as quickly as I can. And all of the hospitalization with COVID coming and all that coincided with the death of George Floyd, which was a different kind of tragic for me just because I was in the hospital when that happened, and I accidentally watched the video to its entirety because I had no clue what was going on in the outside world. So there I am post lung surgery trying to teach myself how to breathe again. And I'm watching this video
Mm.
of this man being murdered saying that he can't breathe. And in my head, I thought that they'll pick him up, put him in the paddy wagon, and then that's where he's going to die. I didn't know that that was going to transpire there at that time. So it was very difficult because one, I'm an anesthesiologist, right? Someone says they can't breathe, you intervene, you do something. Also, as a palliative care specialist, if someone says they can't breathe, you treat their symptoms to make them comfortable. So all these things, and I'm just feeling helpless, like I can't help this man. And from that, not really realizing the effect it had on me, but I actually ended up have to be treated for PTSD because all of that confounded on with the racism that was going on, people tapping you on the shoulder because you're the Black person in the department, help us do something about diversity. It was just too much. And so, yeah, I had to really push through all of that and kind of come out on the other side with a whole different outlook on why am I here and what am I doing. So
That's really powerful because in the midst of just self-care and the keep on and keeping on and all of that, it's this added weight of advocating in social justice and dealing with things in real time as they're evolving. There's the other burden of having to explain what you're going through to coworkers, colleagues, people
right.
just randomly walking down the hall, that you have to now kind of express that in the midst of your own grief. I did want to touch on something you said about I had to keep working, because I remember even in our other panel discussion about how your health was kind of put a little bit on the shelf because there was just so much to do. How often do you, Brandy, Anita, and Latasha, think that it's so common with women to equate their work with their worth, and how do you overcome that?
Well, the old me
Come on.
was like, yeah, because there's always this little voice in the back of my head that just you as it is not enough, right? Like you're not enough, so you have to like be present and doing and showing your value, showing your worth all the time. But that was the old me. Something happened when I emerged from that hospital and turned 40, and it's just the new me is just like I am enough, and I have to keep telling myself that every day. But that's the new baseline. Like I am enough. And it's just constantly being able to evaluate when people ask you to do something, when you know there's deadlines and tasks and things that don't serve you well. It's okay to back out of it because if you back out of it, they'll find somebody else. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I am now. It's just like, does this thing, this talk, this lecture, this chapter, whatever, does this serve me well? If it doesn't, then it's okay to say no and let it
And
go.
that was the turning point. You
Oh
were
yeah,
kind of faced with your own survival. It had to get to that point.
it
And
had
that's
it.
the other thing too.
Unfortunately, it had to get to that point, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but you got there. Yeah. hmm Anyone else want to talk about that, equating work and worth? I was very resentful of some of the resilient quotes that I Googled before this talk. I didn't like most of them. I was trying to find some opening, wonderful comment, but I mean, things, be the hardest person, be the hardest working person, everything was about just pushing it to the limits. And even though you get through the storm, just push out to the sunshine. I mean, maybe there is no sunshine. Maybe we just have to deal with the rain, and we're not able to just push out of this. We're in the storm, and that's the reality as well in terms of being your authentic self. But anyone want to talk about worth and resilience in work?
Well,
But
I
aren't
think
you expected, aren't you
Yeah.
expected to keep pressing forward? Isn't that what's ingrained in you, to keep pressing forward? I was struck by something Brandy said when she said she was in the hospital and she accidentally watched the video. Because in the back of her mind, she knew it was bad. So what does resilience come in at?
Mm-hmm.
When it's ingrained in us as African Americans,
Mm-hmm.
especially women, to always be strong and push forward. So that's what I mean. She accidentally watched the video because she knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you think from the time we are children,
Right.
and I'm definitely gonna let Latasha pull in on that, but
Yes.
from the time we are children and little girls, that's ingrained. Yeah,
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 I think
I can see that.
there's so many pieces here to speak on, but I want to just share too that, I was pregnant. I got pregnant right as the pandemic was happening, and I had a similar experience, Brandy, where I didn't take as much maternity leave because the impression was if you're not seen, you're not working, right? And so part of that is this idea that our value is tied to what other people see us doing, other people being able to use us for their benefit, not necessarily always being to the fidelity of what our values are or being able to show up in the spaces to do the work that we feel like we need to do, but also being imposturing, right? So you talked about how people were calling on you to have to be representative or to give something. And I think as Black women, we often, for us, I think resilience is, we were resilient when we were born, first of all. The challenges that had to occur for us to be born was the first part of our resilience that was instilled. I think now we're in the space of trying to survive. We're actively showing up in spaces, trying to get beyond, a step further than where our mothers or our grandmothers were. And we're trying to navigate culture. We were conditioned and trained to be, show up in spaces, to give of ourselves, to, offer ourselves to other people. And I think the idea of even self-care for Black women is really a new concept. We really don't get a lot of opportunity to actually engage in true self-care. And so when you bring up resilience, I think that sometimes the definition may not fit, or it may not be the best word to use to really, describe the totality of what we bring to the table and the challenges that we face. So I think sometimes when we think of resilience, it is like we've arrived at this place, or that we accomplished this particular thing, and yet we still find ourselves watching videos and finding people that look like us dying, or not having equal rights or not having access to things. So does it feel like we're being resilient? Does that feel like we've arrived? Maybe not. And so it's almost sometimes this position of, we see the things we want to accomplish, but yet in the adversity that we consistently see every day, whether that be on our jobs, whether that be once we step, in our car, when we get in our car to go home, can we be safe going home? When we send our children out into the world, there's a lot of things that we don't have control over. And yet we show up and then are being asked to give yet even more. And so I think that, to me, resilience is something I struggle with, because sometimes I don't feel like I'm being resilient. Sometimes I'm doing the task that's ahead of me right now. Sometimes it's trying to look at what would thriving be, what are the obstacles that are ahead of me to be able to get to that state of saying thriving. But when I think about that balance of trying to, with work and with my value in workspaces and being able to have, I think, the agency that Brandy you have, I'm still a newbie in my role, that I don't know if I have that level of confidence yet to say this thing doesn't serve me, this isn't the project. But I think I'm learning that as I have mentors, and as people are helping me navigate, because there's politics in any job that you have. And so you have to know what risk you take when you set a boundary like that as well. So I'm happy for you that you had are in a space where you're able to do that. And I hope that more of us feel that sense of, we have some choices. We may not have felt like we had that before.
I like what you said too, in terms of, okay, now we're at the surviving mode, and then how do we get to thriving? Doesn't that require a personal definition? So again, we're talking about, either we're looking at this as an outcome, this woman's resilient, or she's resilient because she's continually coping, she's continually getting through, or she's resilient because she accomplished this, she got her PhD, she graduated here, she, is in this position, whatever that is. Or are we looking at it in the sense that thriving could even be, in my view, the capacity to say no? Thriving might be not just you just keep pushing yourself and pushing yourself to the limit, or, as those quotes I read, pass your limits, reach the sky or whatever, is it just that you are, at that point able to say no, or you're able to rest, you're able to say what will, as Brandy said, serve me well, or this is not serving me well, checking in with yourself. But I'm curious to see from anyone online, what is your personal definition of thriving? And have you seen it in others? Do you emulate? Do you admire that and respect that in other folks in your circle?
Well, I'll say I have seen thriving. I have not experienced yet. Like my default is to survive. Um, so much so that I'll look up and I'm like, what's happening? Like, did I sleep? Did I eat? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
But I have an idea in my head of what thriving looks like, and I draw that idea from many women that I've met in my lifetime. I'm gonna tell you, I love me older Black woman with white hair who has seen and been through some stuff, but now she's good. And so though when I see those women, I try to ask them questions. I try to tap into like, where are you now? Because when you have that kind of peace and you know who you are, like that's what I'm striving to be. And so that's the idea that I have in my head. But I could say that I've not reached that pinnacle yet. And it's going to take, I think it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of like relearning some things. Because in my process of going to like being able to say no in the midst of all that, and this is still 2020, like still fresh out of the hospital, my chair was like, I think it's time for you to go up for a promotion. So, Kim, you know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Um, Compiling everything that you've done over the past 5 or 6 years to show the university that you're worthy of being promoted from assistant to associate, right?
That was when you first came back from your leave. It's like, let me
Yes,
get these. I
exactly.
remember a little bit of that too, that you were getting things together. It's like, can you just breathe?
Yeah. So that happened, right? And so
Yeah.
like during that time, like gathering all this stuff, it's just a stressful process, but seeing everything I've done on paper, seeing all the free labor that I've given to the university, all the yeses that I didn't even care about that I've done, all of the like just the things, right? All of the things. I was pretty pissed because I'm like, I did so much stuff and got no compensation for it.
Mm.
You know, you barely get anything for all of the things that you do. And I was looking at some of this stuff and nothing like lit me up, like lit my fire, like, oh, I'm so happy I did this. And I was just like, something's got to change. Like, if I want to stay in this parameter of academic medicine, my road from associate to professor has to look different because those other years were a blur, not even realizing what I've done or how much I've done for free. And so, like, it just kind of just showed me like all these years like it's been a blur and I've just been really surviving to the next to the next to the next, saying yes to stuff because it's been planted in your idea as soon as you sign your contract about do this for promotion. Oh, do this for promotion. Oh, you can get put this on your CV. But really it's benefiting them. I mean, it's benefiting you too, but it's really benefiting the person who's asking you to do it. So that kind of helped me turn some things around and just look toward like that was surviving. So if I'm going to be in this space, I want to do things that serve me because ultimately I want to thrive in whatever career path that I choose. And so like that's the space I'm in now. Like definitely trying to transition, not there yet, but trying to get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Latasha, what do you think in terms of your personal definition of thriving, and have you seen it?
Um, my personal-
I'll give you the person I think had it too, but go ahead. Yeah.
okay. Um, a person that I would say that I've been grateful to connect with in the last year, during the pandemic, is Dr. Patrice Mcclellan. And she's a leadership coach. She's, does DEI work. I had not had previous interactions with her. And I think she has some capacity, which is being able to show up as herself in spaces, unapologetically. She gets to wear her hair in whatever style, color she likes to wear, because she likes color in her hair. And so when I think of thriving, for me, part of it is having like freedom of time, freedom of
Yeah.
being able to be creative in spaces, being able to be your opinion to be valued,
Mhm.
to be welcomed into spaces and heard. And I think that over this last year, I think that she's demonstrated that, and she's also been able to share some ways to help navigate them into, just learning, being in a new role, learning how to introduce that with people that don't know me. And so there's little things that I do, like I wear my hair like this sometimes, into spaces that people usually probably would not. Often wear hoop earrings. That's not professional, right? And so to me, that's just me trying to inch towards thriving, but I have not achieved thriving at this point. I think surviving is part of also the pace in which things go often makes it hard to think about the tomorrows. It's kind of living in the day. And so um, I aspire to get there. As I get little breaks, I try to think about what that future would look like and what I need to introduce into today. But as far as big sweeping gestures to feel like I'm in that thriving place, I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting too, because, Brandy's talking about thriving in a sense of peace in a lot of ways. And you're also talking about thriving in the sense of self-love and acceptance and love and being your authentic self in all spaces, and the freedom that's inherent in that as well. And what do you think, Nina?
When I think of thriving, I think of as myself trying to thrive on the same level as someone like you, Dr. Jenkins, or someone like Dr. Sullivan. Because you are what you see. And I try to, emulate or get on the same level as that thinking, as thinking of you can do it, you're resilient, you can do it, you can thrive. Every time I see there's a panel or something that Dr. Jenkins is involved in, I try to sign on, simply because of that's what I see as thriving. Someone who looks like me, and to me, that's thriving. So it's all about like a mentorship to me. Like I'm around different diverse people that thrives, like my chairperson or um, my program director I work with. So I'm around a lot of people that, in a diverse role. And to me, that's thriving when I can see what they've accomplished and try to emulate that.
Well, I thank you for your kind words, but you inspire me too. And so what we're looking at, is this kind of ongoing dynamic and back and forth of the understanding, like even for you, the strength in your voice and your purpose and overcoming fear and your courage in all spaces. All of those things to me are also under the umbrella of thriving. I was listening to Brandy talking about, going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And, that's constantly and often a struggle of mind. Just like, here's the one carrot, you get to that carrot, and here's another carrot. How do we slow things down to celebrate an accomplishment, even that you're still here, Okay, so it doesn't always have to be some lofty achievement on a podium. It can be that you're still here, that you had a rough day. How do we find the ways, or how do you find the ways to carve out and even celebrate the small things and the small accomplishments throughout your day, your week?
I can jump in with at
Yeah.
least two small things that I do, which don't sometimes feel small in the moment, but I have a few girlfriends that we can say almost anything in our group chat. And so being able to text them something that I've accomplished or done and see the gifts and memes and the words that they share immediately to celebrate in that space. It's like getting the opportunity to acknowledge something that's been done, and then letting them just freely respond, and they're encouraging me, celebrating me, acknowledging it as well. That's something that doesn't take much time to do. So even in the midst of the busy, I can, shoot a quick text, and throughout the course of the day, I'm going to get responses from them, and that feels good for me. The other thing is, sometimes I'll be honest, I will close my door, I will push the back from my chair, and I will hype myself up like, girl, you just did that thing. That you did that. And I will, if I have to just kind of talk in the words that mean something to me, I will do that. For those that watch, there's a show, Insecure. I've been watching this current season, so I don't want anybody to ruin it for me. But one of the characters, she used to hype herself up in the mirror, and she would, say things,
Yes.
and sometimes I will do that in my office, or I'll sit in the car before I go in, like, you gonna conquer the day today because you do it every day. And I'll say those things because if nobody else is going to celebrate me, I have to celebrate myself. And sometimes just the words that come out of my mouth to me are a great acknowledgement of how I celebrate, myself. And that doesn't take long either. It just takes a conscious effort to do it, because sometimes we're last on the list, even for ourselves. And so sometimes I have to say, you know what, before you send this email, let's go ahead and acknowledge the other things that have happened through the day so far, so that, you build up that momentum to go ahead and push send for that scary email that you're saying something that you probably, are going to get a follow-up email about.
Mhm.
But that's two of the things I do. I send a text to a group of people that I love and care about, and that care about me, and then I hype myself up because sometimes that's what's necessary.
That's right. Where's the mirror? We need to get some mirrors at all times. Ready to go and on tap. What about you, Brandy? How do you
Um,
celebrate even the small things?
so I have two things also, and one is like I'm a master napper. Like
Mhm.
we get prepared. So like say I accomplished something, or I finished a paper, or something made a deadline, I will like get myself so like worked up about this nap. Like it's talking about it
Like
starts with like, hot shower, comfy like PJs or lounge clothes or whatever. I have a nap blanket and a nap pillow.
uh-oh,
Don't touch it in the house, like it's mine.
wait a minute.
Okay. It's soft. And then I got a special little nap mat that I put on top of my bed. And that
Wait a
door's
minute,
gonna
a
be
man.
locked. I don't care if kids are banging down, their fingers be up under the door.
Mm-hmm.
And we nap. Like,
Because they're coming after you. They see
yeah,
that you grab the mat and the blanket and this
yeah, they know what mama gonna do, but
it's
that door is
over.
locked.
That's a good thing.
And
Locked
I'm
up.
ready to nap. I have to text my husband like the door is locked, so you don't have to call me if you
Mhm.
get off and you can't get in the room. But so,
I love it. I love
so
it.
that's how I celebrate first, because like sometimes if I think I want to like, oh, I'm gonna go out and celebrate and go to
Right.
happy, like I'm too tired. Like this, it's
That's
not gonna work.
exhausting too.
It's
The
exhausting. So
burden of
like,
having a formal celebration is
yeah.
exhausting. Yeah.
So we get ready for that nap.
Hmm.
The other thing that I like to do is I will hop on a plane or drive. I know it's COVID and everything, but like I have, my friends are like kind of all over the country. And
Yeah.
if someone says something sort of like trip, then
Mhm.
it's on. Like if I'm off, then we'll go and we'll do it. This last time I had a group of friends and somebody mentioned I want to do something for my birthday, and I swear in like 48 hours we had a whole trip planned
Oh,
to Palm Springs just cause, and it's like it was the best time we've had and didn't go nowhere.
yeah.
just
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 for
together,
folks.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
how I do it.
I love that. I love that. And what about you, Anita? I celebrated with you the other night when you got your dancing
Yeah, I
awards.
put on my red because I think I'm Superwoman.
You have that beautiful dress.
And so I normally, if I get everything done on my to-do list, I celebrate that. It's
Yeah.
it's something that I'm doing, I'm working. And if I
Mhm.
get all of that done, I celebrate that. I go tell my supervisor or I go tell somebody, got everything done on my to-do list today. So
And then you
all
can
I
bring,
do is hype myself up. I'm Superwoman. I can do it.
absolutely.
It's like that.
Oh yeah, that's the posture too. Yeah,
Yep, that's the
Super
posture.
Wonder Woman. I, it's interesting, Randy, that you talked about naps. I was thinking about as a child. My dad used to have me watch all these boxing matches. I don't know whether he, secretly hoped for a boy. I'm only child, so I watched a lot of boxing growing up. I watched VHS tapes of boxing, and one of the things though, when you think about boxing, no matter how strong they are and, the willpower, no one ever questions the strength or the fortitude of a boxer. But after every round, it doesn't matter who the opponent is or how hard or whatever's happening in the round, they always go to the corner. And no one ever questions, their strength. And sometimes I think for us as women, as Black women, there's, some guilt involved in taking that rest. And not necessarily after you finished a marathon, but just, the things that you need to do, the accomplishments that you've made, or just getting through the day, deserves that rest. And so there's always the flip side of guilt when women take the time that they need to continue on the journey. Have you dealt with guilt, and how have you overcome it or seen that overcome in those around you with taking the rest that you need and asking for what you need to keep moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with that guilt. And surprisingly, it's just in my own home. Um, because my husband has the opposite personality to me, like go, 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 sleep when you're dead, like that type of thing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it made me feel like I was small. I'm like, he's not even in medicine, right?
Right.
And so I used to feel guilty about that until I wasn't guilty, until I didn't feel guilty. And I was just like, okay, that's you. You do that. I'm gonna do me. Like I'm not that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just like feeling like um I should be keeping up or should be doing more in my own home, and like that's not gonna work because if I feel like that at work and then I feel like that at home, no one's going to get anything from me. So I definitely had to, just address that in my own home. And then at work, just the new me's not doesn't feel guilty anymore because
Yeah.
I felt like when I got sick, it was at work. Like I worked the full day with the whole collapsed lung,
Mm.
and then got off and drove myself to ER. So it's like I don't feel guilty about like that stuff anymore. But I definitely did go through that, feeling bad about
Mhm.
either taking time off or um I don't know, like if you're sick, actually calling in because you're sick. Like it's all kind of stuff that we go through, not just physicians, just women in general for professional. And it's just like I think we have to see now that like you can't feel guilty and be dead at the same time, right? So like we can run ourselves into a grave and then that's it. So it's like you have to preserve yourself and take care of yourself because you can't take care of anyone if you don't take care of yourself. And it sounds like a saying, but that's real. That's a reality. Like if you run yourself into the ground, no one's going to get the best of you. Not even your job, not your kids, not your like no one's going to get the best of you. And so I try to live by that because I had to learn the hard way that it's true. It's very true.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that quote, and you may have heard it too, that, my mom said that too. Give yourself to yourself before you give yourself away. And it does kind of help us to stay balanced when we're aware of whether our joy cup is full or halfway full or running on empty. I've been surprised sometimes when I do ask, students who are going through things, well, and not just students, a lot of grown folks too, ask them, what brings you joy? And sometimes at the end of that is a person's name. And, I always say it's hard enough to make yourself happy. It's a bigger burden for them to take on your happiness as well. So you can have a name on there, but I hope the list is long enough that you can pull things from that joy list when you have the hard days, when you're feeling, discouraged, when you've had a failure, you're in the midst of the storm. What are you going to pull off that list? And how many things may you need to pull off that list just to maintain your cup to full or overflowing? Anyone else want to talk about guilt?
I will. I'm going to go back to dissertation phase. The
Yeah.
guilt of I should be writing.
Mm,
That was a heavy burden to bear. Thinking of these missed opportunities, whether that had been resting or working or doing other things, but just thinking of time that was passing, that the writing wasn't happening. And at a certain point, I had to demonstrate for myself that feeling guilty wasn't getting it done. Like
mhm,
shaming myself wasn't encouraging me or motivating me to actually write. And so I had to think of it more as okay, that was yesterday. When are the times that I've designated to write? Can I commit to those times versus saying, looking at these missed opportunities? So one of the things, even when I'm talking to other colleagues or friends that are in their dissertation process, I encourage them to say, instead of worrying about the time that's spent, let's talk about what hour in your week can you designate for your writing, so that when you're feeling guilty, you can say, I'm not may not be writing right now, but on Wednesday at 7 p.m. I've designated that hour to write, and give yourself the opportunity to look forward to that time, so that you gives you freedom to be able to rest, sleep, have time with your family during the other time. And that was what I had to do, because otherwise I was finding myself then missing more and more time, carrying the guilt instead of carrying the opportunities and the hope ahead of me to do the work. And so eventually it got done, thankfully. And then I think the other part with guilt with at work, I think I've been working through that as the pandemic, having a baby during the pandemic, having I have two children. And so as I started to
mm,
see the needs of my family, and very similar to what Brandy said, is if I'm not here and I'm not well, nobody wins. I have a
mm,
family that needs me and depends on me. And so putting things that, if something happened to me, my position would be posted
mhm,
and my family will be missing me, it puts a new perspective. And so as have gained that new perspective, it gives me freedom to say, my child is sick and I want to be at home with my child to take care of my child. That's what I'm going to do. And it gives me more agency to feel the power to do that, because at the end of the day, my values have to be present in my day-to-day living. And so that guilt doesn't serve me. And it doesn't serve my family, because I don't want to be the parent at one point where my child says, you were never here when we didn't feel well, right?
mm,
Or you were always working. That's not the value that I want to instill, is that life is always working. I want my
mm,
children to see that there's a well-roundedness, that there's balance, that there's opportunity to prioritize. And so that guilt just doesn't serve me in the same way that it was before, where guilt was a thing I felt like I had to carry as this badge of honor to say, I have to be present, I have to be seen, I have to do. Who's telling me I have to?
mhm,
Was that just I was conditioned that way? It was unspoken rules and guys, if you're not going to speak them out loud, then I have this PTO, I'm going to use the PTO. So I think that
yes,
that's where I'm at now. I think continuing to evolve, and also try to model that for my staff. When my staff need to call off sick, I'm not questioning them. You say you're sick, you're sick. Take care of
yeah,
yourself, get well. When you can come back, please do so that you can service the students. And I think it's opportunity to model for them that if I take a day off, that means it's okay for you to take a day off. So I think
mhm.
for me, it's a multi-layer, that I don't want to feel guilty about my time, nor do I want my staff to feel guilty for the time they need to take for themselves.
It's very powerful.
I'm gonna have to make an appointment with Latasha because I don't have guilt at all. So there must be something wrong because there is no guilt at all with me.
Wait a minute.
Is
Wait,
there
there's
something
no
wrong,
pressure. So
Latasha?
wait.
I'm gonna have to make an appointment because
No, you've already succeeded. You've already successfully completed the process.
You're
I'm
already
like,
graduated from the program. If you don't have guilt, you've already. We're still in guilt university.
I mean about
You're
nothing.
done. You
Like,
moved on.
I don't have guilt about nothing.
I love that too because my mom always said that too, and I've heard that before. That guilt is a useless emotion. I mean, some people think of it as a motivator. I'd rather be motivated by goals, joy,
I do
peace.
useless, so maybe that's it. Because I don't do useless, so maybe that's it. So I'm meant to make an appointment with you, Latasha, because I don't have that emotion.
I love that. And I'm going to write that down too. I'm saying, I don't have guilt. I don't know that. I don't know you, guilt. When guilt knocks on the door, don't open.
Because when you think about it, what are you guilty? You didn't do anything wrong. You're like, why are we guilty? We didn't do anything.
Well, and guilt can come from comparison. It comes from worth and it can come from comparison. So, I know there are probably some students on the line, you used the idea, well, I should be studying now, I should be doing this work. Maybe you're looking at, the student to the right or, your friend to the left, and you say, well, look at how they move through. No complaints. Look like it's easy breezy. I mean, that's the other side of guilt. I mean, in a vacuum, you may not have it. Once we start to compare other journeys, that can be
Yeah, no, I just meant like it's irrational for us to feel guilt because we technically haven't done anything wrong. So it's
Nothing wrong.
irrational. And like as far as like comparison, like I take from my 5-year-old son.
Hmm.
I use this all the time now because he told me, well, that's just not my talent.
Hmm.
Because it was something we were trying to get him to do or run or track or something. He's 5. He's like, well, that's not my talent. So I said, okay, well, that's not my talent either. So that's if I see someone doing well and in my head, I say, you go, sis. That's not my talent. I
He
can.
needs to hold on to that too,
Yeah.
because I think, people will kind of dictate to you what you should do and how you should operate and what you should love and what you should be good at. And only you can define yourself for yourself. I love that. Now we kind of fast forward into celebrating small victories, big victories, but I don't think we really dug deeper into coping in the midst of actual crisis. So we're kind of talking about, how am I thriving? How am I surviving? But like when you're really in the midst of it and there's no even, perceivable way out, like you're not seeing the end of the tunnel and the end of the road, the finish line of whatever the crisis is. How do you cope?
That's a good one.
You want our personal or you want our recommendation?
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm already looking at, we can already say, we know, like I pray. I know it just, I don't know. I'm not gonna, I have to pray. I have to. So we can talk about that as well. Because I'm looking at people, they say, well, which answer do you want? I mean, there's some strength that you can't I don't have it all in me to do the things, get through the day. And so I don't know, gratitude definitely helps me to get perspective and prayer. And the folks that I look up to, a lot of them, in my family, I mean, that's how they've gotten through most of the challenges and all of the challenges in their lives. So that's big for me. And let's talk about coping. One last thing I did want to say, we were talking about role models. My role model used to be Claire Huxtable until I got in some of those shoes. And then I started to resent some of that. So I love the show. She'd come home and, put the suitcase to the side, throw the coat up and had all this energy for all these, I don't know how many kids they had, 6 kids, 5 or 6 kids, laughing at his jokes and throwing the apron on and dancing around and singing. I mean, we very rarely ever saw her, Brandy, just lay down and take a nap.
Right,
And
exactly.
I know that I know all those kids got on her nerves with that because she worked full time. And so all I'm saying is, when I started looking, I said, I don't know if I saw a lot of self-care. She's a beautiful woman, but I don't know if I saw a lot of self-care. I saw a lot of, I can do it all. That was kind of the lesson from Claire Huxtable, is that you can do it all and you can do it all at the same time. But let's talk about coping.
I would say one thing that I kind of taught myself in my 20s,
Yeah.
I call it standing in front of the mirror naked. That could be for real or not for real. It could be proverbial or not proverbial.
Anita looked
Um,
up. I started with prayer, and then you went. I mean, we swerved all the way left, but no guilt. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry,
I'm in constant prayer. I'm always talking. Like God is in you. So I'm talking
yes,
to myself all
yes,
the time.
yes.
But when I need to cope, what I mean by that is like I get brutally honest with myself,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of looking at the situation. Let's just say like something very stressful is going on, nothing's going right. I'm not doing anything right, right? And so like I'll stop and I'll look at the situation and I'll ask myself questions and be very, very, very honest with myself, right? It's
Yeah.
nobody else is around to hear it, but so like what are you feeling? Like I
Yeah.
feel like a failure. Or why do you feel like a failure? Because I can't get to this so and so on time. Like so why do you care if you get to this so and so on time? Do you even care about this thing? No. I just don't want to look bad in front of so and so. Oh, so okay, so there we are. You don't want to look bad in front of so and so. So why do you care about so and so's opinion so much? And I keep going and keep going and keep going until I get to the root cause of whatever that emotion is. And then I forgive myself for it
Mm.
because it's usually something very human. And I
Mhm.
have to do that with myself a lot. And I started that like I said, way back in my 20s. Um, when I found myself getting into that victim mentality, or
Mm.
why is this happening to me? Or
Mhm.
why he do me like that? Or and it was like that's not gonna work for me. So I started like asking the hard questions like,
Yeah.
so what are you saying? Why did they do what to you?
Mhm.
What was your role in this situation? How did you get here? How did
Mm.
you let that happen? And so that's what I do. And usually, like I said, I get to a real like basic human emotion. I forgive myself for that, and then I just keep it moving.
Now let me ask you, when you're talking, you are literally talking about checking in with yourself and,
Yes.
and asking yourself these questions. Are you thinking this? Are you verbalizing this? Are you writing this down? I mean, we all know journaling can be very powerful too. Yeah.
I wish I could journal. I
Mhm.
wish like I could keep a planner. Like I go
Mhm.
by it so pretty. I get the stickers, I get the markers, and then I can't find it a week later. So
Yeah.
like I want to be a journaler and I want to like write stuff down, but usually it just doesn't happen. So it's just all in my head. Like I do keep the notes app on my phone,
Mhm.
and I'll pull out. I have a notes section that I call pearls and edges, like clutch
Yeah.
my pearls, snatch my edges. So when I get to one of those thoughts, like, whoa, where did that come from? I put it in that section.
Mhm.
So that's the only form of journaling that I do. But yeah, like I really do check in with myself and make sure that, and then when I get to that, like, ooh, like, Jesus talking to you now, girl, I'll put that in my little notes app and,
Yeah.
yeah. And
I
that
love
helps me
that.
because
I
then
wrote that down.
when I see someone else struggling in that manner, I got something to give. And it's a
Mm.
personal testimony. Take it how you leave it, but this is, what I was experiencing at that time. So what you think is happening is probably not what's happening. You need to check in with yourself because this is what I found out about myself.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That is so beautiful. Because it is a process. I think sometimes people think and say, "Oh, you're just coping and you're just thriving, you're doing well, or how," and they don't see the journey. I mean, you're talking about steps. You're talking about some time that you're checking in with yourself because you deserve it.
Yeah.
And so, and who else is going to do that work for you? You know,
Yeah,
but
and
you.
it's, yeah,
Mhm.
and you have to get like a lot of people don't like to go there because you find out something that's not so pretty about yourself, but you got to go there because if, you don't learn to heal yourself, then you're just going to keep reliving the same experience again. So that's what helps me cope, especially with like when stuff gets busy outside of my control.
Mhm.
Um, and with work too. There's
Mhm.
a lot of stuff with work that I was like panicking about. I didn't even care about. I just didn't want to look bad in front of so and so. And
Mm.
it's like that person don't even care about you. So why you care? And just
Mhm.
figuring out what is that thing. And usually it comes back to, well, I probably was feeling like I wasn't enough. And so when it gets down to that root cause, you just gotta work on that root cause.
And meanwhile, that person has moved on. You're
They ain't think about you.
devastated, hurt, feeling bad, and they have moved on. They're watching the Netflix. They're not even thinking about me or you, like, and so that's a very strong perspective. Anyone else on coping? How do you cope when it
I
is
mean,
like,
Brandy could have dropped the
oh,
mic on that one. I mean, that
yeah.
transparency, that honesty, being able to pull the layers back to say, what about this is bothering me, and then being able to deal with that, right? So, it was some pieces there where you're acknowledging what role you played in that process. I think there's a lot of different things that people can do, but I want to share this little story, and hopefully that it'll help illustrate some of what Brandy was saying about this journey. One of the things that someone told me this story many, many years ago, and it is originally based into like more of a spiritual story, but I'm gonna adapt it just for different listeners. But it's called Push. And so one day I'm gonna use a woman because we're women in this panel. A woman was, in her home, and a man came by and said, "Listen, I put a big boulder outside, and I have an assignment for you. I want you to push the boulder for me every day." She said, "Okay, that's not a problem." So every day she diligently went out and pushed the boulder, gave it what she had. And a different traveler came by and said, "You're so stupid. You've been pushing this motor every single day. You get up and you do this work. You haven't moved it not 1 inch." And so she thought about it. She went back to her house and said, "He's right. I've been out here pushing this motor. This thing hasn't moved at all. Why am I wasting my time?" And so the first person, the man came back and she started complaining. She said, "You have me out here looking like a fool. I'm out here pushing this motor, wasting my time, and it hasn't moved at all." And the man said, "I never told you to move it. The assignment I gave you was to push it. By pushing it, your arms are stronger, your back is gained more muscle, and your legs are stronger. You become more able to do other things. I'm going to help you move it, but you did the assignment." In
Wow.
that, one of the things that I think about is sometimes we get so focused on doing the big thing that we forget about the little things. And so what I often do for myself in my journal, which I often lose them too, but I draw a picture of a rock. And in that rock, I start writing down anything that I think is just a part of my life, whether it's grieving me, whether it's something joyous. And I write down people's names. I write down people that I have relationship with or I want relationship with. I write down tasks that I need to complete and just hopes that I have. And then what I do is I take that, and over time, I start thinking about what's one thing I can do to address anything in this rap? What's one thing that I have power over? What's one thing that I have some control to address in this rap? So if it's calling someone to apologize, if it's sending a text message to check on somebody, if it's sending an email, if it's taking a nap, if it's eating a good balanced meal, whatever that one thing is, I do that over time. And what I often do, especially when I talk to other people, is I say, over a couple months, go back and look at that rap.
Hmm.
Is there anything in the rock that's different than what it was 3 months ago,
Mhm.
a year ago? We'll see things change as we continue to see life as a process and not just as a goal. And so when we get stuck in our own mind and we feel like we're in crisis, sometimes we can't have any forethought. We need to brain dump, get all the things that are grieving us out, be able to write them down, see them on paper, and then start thinking, is there anything I have any control over? 'Cause sometimes when we feel in chaos and crisis, we don't feel like we have any personal agency or we don't have any power over those things. Sometimes it's not about solving the problem all at once, it's being able to solve little things over time to be able to start seeing that momentum move to get to a place where maybe the chaos isn't as intense as it was at one point. We start to see some successes that we weren't having before because we weren't intentionally looking at what options we had in those scenarios. And so over time, we start to see some things that were a problem no longer be a problem for us
Hmm.
anymore. We see some things resolve themselves. We see ourselves build some momentum and we get to a different place. And oftentimes, I can't promise you this, but oftentimes when we make that commitment, when you look back at it and you do a new rock, there's gonna be some things that are in the same place. I think moved in some way. You've seen some things change. And so I like to see that as just giving an opportunity. One, it gives us the opportunity to acknowledge the things that we're feeling overwhelmed by. It gives us opportunity to say, where are we at in this process? And then see it as a process, that it's not something that has to be solved overnight, but that we have some levels of opportunities that we can make some changes to be able to help accomplish the things that we want to see. So that's just a thing that I do for myself every so often when I need to get some things out of my head. And it gives me a great sense of accomplishment when I can go back and look at ones that I've written years before, and I'm like, oh, ooh, I was tripping over that. That was what was bothering me at that time. Look how
Yes.
small that feels today, right? Then it felt like this monumental thing, but once it's passed, I feel like, oh, okay. That's interesting to see the things that were once grieving me or once a challenge and how some of those things resolve.
And look at how far you've come. I mean, that is something. That is something. And I feel like we need to, I almost feel like we need to do a therapy. We need to,
Yeah. I'm gonna need to
give
see
you a donation for some of
Latasha.
this free
Yeah.
counseling.
I'm gonna need to see Latasha because I don't think
Brandy's just smiling. She knows she's, we feel like
I'm
we're
looking
gonna
for
counsel.
virtual office hours. That's all.
I just, she's got late office hours
I'm gonna
today.
need to evade them office hours.
Deal.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
do
love
none of
that.
I can't control it. I don't be bothered with it. So I'm gonna need to see you.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And we know where to find you too.
Yeah.
You got a longer track up here, Brandy from Texas, but we know where to find you. That was powerful though, and I think I'd like to try doing those exercises too. What about you, Anita? How do you cope
I
when you
just
get knocked
told
down?
you,
You getting
if I
down?
can't control it, I don't be bothered with it. So I need to see Natasha for some coping mechanisms.
You know what though? I will say that. Now, I want to ask you this. Is there anyone in all three of your someone in your family who you think has really helped you with coping? Because that mentality you just said, Anita, see, I feel like that's something you've also seen mirrored in strength, whether your mom, I don't know who it
My
is.
mom, my
It's your mom.
aunts,
Okay.
my mom and my aunts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, I come
That's
here.
passed on.
Just
That's not
with,
just something you.
yeah,
Mhm.
my mom and my aunts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and so we're kind of getting towards the end of the session, but I did want to also talk about how paradoxical things can be, in life. I mean, we're obviously in the midst of a pandemic. People still, of course, life is going on. What kind of words of encouragement would you want to give to people who may be listening, who are just having a difficult time pushing through and getting out of these current storms? I would say for myself, I would say, it is okay it is okay to not be okay. It's all right. You don't have to compare your victory to anyone else's. And it is important, as we've alluded to today, to check in with yourself, how you're feeling at the beginning of the day may be very different from the end. This morning, we did resident interviews for anesthesia, and the resident interview session started at 7:30 in the morning, which for some folks on the West Coast meant that it was 4:30 in the morning. And so, lo and behold, you're looking at where they're stationed. They're in Portland, and you're looking and talking to them. And the one woman I talked to, I said, "How you doing? Good morning. How you doing?" And she just looked dead in the camera, and she said, "I'm tired. Period." Not trying to gloss it up or make it sound professional. I am tired. And you know what? I looked at her and I said, you know what? I'm tired too. And we just talked. She said, I haven't had my coffee. I said, I haven't had my coffee either. And so, there's just some of that recognition of just being true to yourself. I mean, just acknowledging your truth and not comparing it to anyone else is the first step towards even healing. But you don't have to spruce it up. As my girlfriend always says, put high heel shoes on it. It is what it is. Sometimes it's nap time, like Brandy said. Sometimes it's just, calling your girlfriend. Sometimes it's just, doing something that brings you joy and being very intentional about that, just as you would for someone else who was dealing with pain. But what kind of encouragement would you give to someone who is even, feeling like life is hitting them wave after wave, and it's hard to kind of get back on their feet?
I would just say what I tell the students I have an open door policy. And like you said, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that because there's a lot of stress factors when you're in college, when you're in a grad program.
Mm-hmm.
I just tell my students, to try to strive to be the best and try to strive to get through this, but you're going to have times where you're not going to be okay
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And so, that's a coping mechanism. I tell them, look at some of the things you can do to try to get through the day.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. You're in grad school, so it's hard. It's I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you it's easy, but I do have an open door policy, and you can come and talk to me anytime you want to. And I think people just knowing they have someone they can come and talk to, it makes it better. So that's
It does.
It's
It's the
okay.
nature of it that it's hard. There's no way to
Yeah.
make it
Right.
it's easy. It
Right.
is a difficult journey
It's a
that they're
difficult
on.
journey. And,
That's the
I
reality.
give them all the resources that UT, that's one thing about where we work at. So
Mhm.
where we work at, there's multiple resources that
Yeah.
the students have that they can, use. And I'm like, it's in your, you pay for it, use it. Go to the mental health counseling if you have to, or go, see someone if you have to, if you're not already seeing someone. So
And sometimes folks look at that as a form of weakness when
but
they
it's
do
not. It's
need
not a
help.
form of weakness.
Mhm.
I've learned that growing up. It's not a form of weakness, which has always
So
been a myth. And so in our culture, within our culture, it reminds me of this story I saw on Bob Hart's Abishola.
Mhm.
One of the workers, he had a panic attack,
Mhm.
and so he collapsed at work. So he got to the hospital, to show us based off of Nigerians. So
Mhm.
then he woke up and then he said, "What happened?" And the nurse said, "You had a panic attack." He's like, "No, no, no. It has to be more serious than this. I'm Nigerian. We cannot have psychological issues." And she's
That's
like,
the
"No, you
stigma.
had a panic attack." And that, if it's in some cultures, it's embedded that you cannot have psychological issues. So it goes back again. It's okay not to be okay.
Mhm.
This pandemic has brought that out. A lot of people are seeing that now. So I think that's, part of getting our mental health back um, to where it should be. So,
Right, and that wellness is wealth. I mean, that
yes,
just having that health, having that, is very powerful, even to
yeah,
seek help, to seek rest, and to really,
yeah, you have to.
give yourself the compassion. I did read a quote on resilience, that resilience is based on compassion for ourselves as well as compassion for others. And that was one definition of resilience that really resonated for me, because a lot of the definitions were about just getting stronger and stronger and faster and working harder. It was all about kind of just pushing yourself past your limits. But why would you want to push past your limits? This is you have these limitations for a reason. You've been built like this for a reason, and there's no reason to try to exceed that. I agree. Anyone else?
I'm glad you mentioned compassion, Kim. That's the big thing, is having compassion for yourself. I just wonder, like, have you ever just listened to how you talk to yourself sometimes?
Yeah.
Like, I've like been unconsciously just talking to myself like I wouldn't even talk to my child. Like,
Mm.
oh, you sound so stupid and you can't. And it's just like, wait a minute, wait a minute, you know?
Mhm.
So a couple of small things that I would recommend for anyone who's struggling is just to check yourself when you're talking to yourself like you wouldn't talk to your mama or your child. And
Mm.
then ask yourself a couple of things like, okay, like, am I doing my best right now? Am I doing my best? a lot of times the answer is yes. Even if you're a hot mess, that's your best, right? And then the other thing is like the other question is this good enough, right?
Yeah.
Because we have this bar that we set for ourselves that no one else set it for us. It was, something internal that we did. And a lot of times just good enough is showing up and you've done a tremendous service to someone. So I have to check in, ask myself those questions a lot, like especially, running the kids around and like I'm late for a birthday party and I'm like, oh, if you would have just got up. But I'm like, hold up, are you doing your best?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this good enough? I'm getting these kids to the dang on birthday party now.
Come
They
on.
got a present. It's not wrapped, but so what? That is this good enough? And then the answer is yeah, and I usually immediately feel better about myself.
You're not saying it like that to yourself, is it? Or who are you saying it to like that?
Myself, I told you, God is in me.
Still a
And I
little
talk to
harsh.
myself a lot, so I'm talking to God all the time.
Tone that down. Is it good enough? No, just tone it down a little bit. Yeah, and still be a little sweeter to you, friend.
Yeah, I can work on that. I can
Good
work on
enough?
that.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah.
The other
That's funny that you said that, Brandy, because I had two girls too. And I mean that's kind of like a tagline for me. I'm doing the best I can. Now, I don't know how anyone would want to finish that sentence, but I'm doing the best I can. Dot. And that's
Sometimes it is what it is.
that is what it is. Yeah, so that's okay too.
Yeah, if
Like,
their tardy bell is 8:05. If I
Mhm.
pull up at 8:05 and push them out the car,
Mhm.
that's good enough. Because they got the one. I'm a working mama and I got y'all. I took y'all to school. That's a big deal for me to even take y'all to
Yes.
school.
In
And y'all got
anesthesia, yes it is.
right on time. Don't shut that door. Don't pull that sign. It's 8:05. Let my kids come. Don't send me no tardy email. We good enough,
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes, yes, yes.
oh.
I love it.
Brandy, like y'all saw me out here.
Yeah, you saw me.
You were late. Y'all saw me out here.
8:05
All
and
back
10
in lifetime.
seconds. You're late.
Oh,
The
I
other
think
thing it's a small thing too, is
Mhm.
that a lot of people are gonna have you got a password that you gotta use several times a day to log into your account. I
Yes.
used to make my password an affirmation or a
Ooh,
Bible verse or
yeah.
something positive, so that I force myself to tell myself something positive 300 times a day because you logging in.
Ooh, that
Um,
is wonderful. I
so
love it.
I recommend that tip in counseling. Don't be afraid of it. Get
Yeah.
you a therapist. Like,
Mhm.
if you can't like afford a therapist and you're in school, use what is the EAP or the
well, we have a counseling center at UT.
the counseling
Free for
center.
students. Yeah.
Yeah, like that stoicism is for the birds. Find you somebody to talk to, find you a sounding board, find you
Yes.
safe friends.
Mhm.
When I say safe, the ones that don't judge you, the
Mm.
ones that not gonna talk behind you, behind your back, the ones you can tell anything and they don't blink, get you some safe people and use that. So
I love those. I love all of those things. And, you're kind of like, because of what you went through, you develop like a bank, like a reserve of things to draw on. Like there's a lot of richness and depth there that may not have been, even before the sickness and illness that you faced and overcame. I mean, you have so much, and a lot of strength. And what about you? Now we're
come on,
gonna
come on,
start charging us.
Listen,
close
you
out.
all have hit the nail on the head. I do want to echo the point. If you need to talk to someone, do so. There's no badge of honor for fighting this battle alone. We are a part of community. An individual can't survive on their own. An individual, we can't. And so if there is no shame, there is no judgment in getting help, whether that be going to the counseling center, whether that be using your own private insurance, but find somebody that you can talk to. And I encourage you to keep an open mind and understand the process. So one of the things that sometimes people get frustrated by is that first appointment. They're like, well, I wasn't better the first appointment. It's a process.
Hmm.
Keep going. Be
Yeah.
honest. Show up as yourself. If you need to use some choice words in your session, then do that. If you
Hmm.
need to talk about your values in those sessions, then do that. But be you in those sessions so you get the most out of it. Um, Another part is I love what Brandy said about surround yourself with people that are your people. Find your tribe. If it has to be online, if you have to connect with people on Twitter threads, if it has to be, following certain types of TikToks, but also being mindful of what you consume. Because
Hmm.
right now, we talked about a little bit before about comparison, what we consume, even if we're subconsciously, it does impart in us. So one of the things that I think it might have been a pastor talked about how you're scrolling social media, and then later in the day you realize you don't feel very well. And part of it is you intake you took in so much information, whether that was somebody on vacation, you're like, I know their money isn't right, or they look like they're successful in their job, and you're like, they don't even show up half the week of half the work week. We take that in, and then it's just sitting inside of us, and we're making judgments about ourselves. We're interpreting it in ways and processing it, and sometimes it's too heavy to have to do, especially when we have our own life to live. So sometimes we have to unplug. Sometimes we have to curate whatever the things that we're following to feed us in a way that's meaningful. So if you're following a lot of junk, I encourage you to follow some things that are edifying, follow some things that are going to be pouring back into you, because your cup can run empty just on consuming the wrong things. So we have to be very thoughtful about that as well. Also, I encourage people to understand that be you, know you enough to know what you need. Sometimes it's stop taking a minute to say, what do I need right now? Did I eat? Did I sleep? Did I connect to someone that I love? Was I kind to myself? Did I get the primary things that I needed to do today done? And if is there one thing that I need to do that would make me feel like I've accomplished the day? It may not be 16 things, it may be one thing. It may say, you know what, I ate something green today. I had a vegetable. I'm gonna be proud. I drink water today. And if you're not drinking water or eating a vegetable, I encourage you to please do so, because your body is a temple and you got to pour the right things into it as well physically. And so I think it's a matter of to encourage you. If you're here today, congratulations, because there's some people that aren't. And so that is a success. And it's important that you also say the right things to yourself so that you do take a minute to say, you know what, I'm going to exercise gratitude, gratefulness. That those things are imperative, that we can take a step back to say, I'm grateful for what I have, even if it feels like a little bit. Sometimes you have to just say, I'm grateful for having the breath that I take at the moment. um, and give yourself a moment to take a conscious breath. If you're feeling overwhelmed, take in a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel your body in your chair or feel your feet on the ground, and just be present with yourself, because we have to sometimes just slow down before we take on the next thing. Um, and I hope that whatever you take from today, that you hear that it's a process for us too, and it's okay, and we're accepting that we may not have gotten to the place that we are striving to be, but we've made accomplishments along the way, and we celebrate them, we celebrate each other, and we're excited to see the things that you're going to do and that you're doing in your life, and we hope that you take that time to.
Those are wonderful words. It makes me think about how grateful I am to share this time with you tonight. One other definition I heard was resilience takes a village. And so, you have to be true to yourself and know yourself, but you also have to be courageous enough to surround yourself with those folks that will support you. My mom, and I'll close with this. My mom, I'll talk to her about my day, work, home, all these things. And she's had a consistent question that she's asked me since I was in college days. And she'll say, in her sweet little voice, because she's 4'9" and 80 pounds. Okay, this is a sweet little lady. Size 3 shoe. I mean, this is a tiny lady, powerhouse, tiny. And she'll say, well, Kim, what have you done nice for yourself today? And I asked my girlfriends that they're talking about and stressed out, and I asked them, what have you done nice for yourself? And we're not talking about, some spa day, or if you bought yourself a diamond necklace or something. I mean, we're talking about small things, maybe it's your favorite cup of coffee, or it's that you just talked to your girlfriend and you watched some encouraging, video, or read book, said a prayer, you know, these things, you know, you're planning on spending time with friends and family, these things, and checking in with yourself. And so the answer to that question, if she asked me today, is I connected with three wonderful, powerful, beautiful women professionals who've inspired me tonight and hopefully inspired many, many more on the line who could really hear this powerful message. So thank you so much for sharing this time. I'm looking forward to the next one. We'll get through this winter. And happy holidays. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Happy holidays, ladies.
Happy holidays.
Days.
Bye-bye.